collectors themselves, George and Maida
Yes.
Abrams, and how they amassed this collection, what it was like working with George Abrams on this show.
Oh, it was a great pleasure. George and Maida collected drawings for 50 years. They are probably the most important collectors of our lifetimes of Northern European drawings, specifically Dutch. They got started many years ago, probably around 1960, and there have been numerous exhibitions of their collection. But there's never been a show of their collection of Rembrandt drawings and Rembrandt school drawings. So this is the first time that this particular aspect of their collection is celebrated. They are passionate collectors, one's struck by the thrill of the chase in their collecting patterns. That they have a real interest in the pursuit of drawings and an ongoing kind of appetite for the art of the deal, and they have collected, quite frankly, with less resources than some other people have, but have done wonderfully well because of their deep understanding of the history of art, and also their interest in the individual artists, and as I say, in the thrill of the chase. I think that's really the most important thing for the Abrams. Maida passed away some years ago, but she was very much part of this team that put this collection together.
And did they start collecting with a primary interest in Rembrandt, or did that evolve as they began their journey in collecting?
You'd have to ask George that, but I think they were attracted to the naturalism of Dutch drawings generally, of Dutch art generally, and I think it evolved. They became interested in figures who are not necessarily the household names of the history of art, but they saw the wonderful quality of these artists, and that just as in their collecting of Rembrandt in his school, they've discovered the merits of lesser known people, of artists like Fernarius and Koning. These are not the first names that one associates with the Rembrandt school, but they've discovered the special delights and quality of these artists. Some 50 drawings by his students, as well as his circle. It's a rather important distinction that some of these artists drew in a Rembrandtesque style, but there's no evidence that they ever studied with him, but they simply imitated his manner, which was quite common in this period. And there's some that are documented students, and we go to some pains in the catalog to try to explain which artists can be actually documented as pupils and which aren't. And there's some that have been traditionally associated with Rembrandt, but who in fact have very little connection with him at all. Someone like Jacob Bakker is a wonderful master in his own right, but there's no evidence that he ever was a pupil of Rembrandt's, and he actually draws in a very different style. The wonderful black and white chalk drawings that they do on blue paper, he and Flink both. They undoubtedly worked together, those two artists, but and Flink is known to be a student of Rembrandt, but there's no evidence that Bakker ever was, and Rembrandt never did drawings of that kind of refinement on blue paper at all.
So this show is an opportunity then to show the work of the wider school and the students around him, as well as clear up some of those.
Yes, one of the best things about this show is to show the special merits of the individual artists who are around him. To show how wonderful a draftsman someone like Lievens is. Rembrandt and Lievens shared a studio when they were very young artists in Leiden. But most of the drawings that are in this show are actually from a later period in Lievens' career and show his mastery of landscape drawing, fabulous things. He was a superb artist in his own right. That Rembrandt was dedicated to drawing throughout his life, to drawing from life, and he had an uncanny, preternatural ability, actually, to capture gesture and expression and different postures that were dramatic and revealing. And he assembled these drawings throughout his life. He must have had thousands of drawings, and they certainly were accessible to his pupils and were used as teaching devices. That was part of their function. But the most interesting thing about Rembrandt's drawings is that most of them are, as you suggested, were done really for aide de memoire or for simply a gathering, a kind of repository or repertoire of gesture and expression that then were not used as preparatory studies for paintings or for prints or from the other traditional things that are the final finished work of art, but were actually filed away, as it were, as a kind of repertoire of gesture to be consulted, surely, but which were then recast when he executed the final work, so that there are very few drawings, surprisingly few, that are connected to finished works of art. But that he had an ability, I think Houbraken expressed it the best. Houbraken, who was actually almost a contemporary of Rembrandt, writes this in 1712 or then about. He says that Rembrandt had this remarkable ability. He calls it a unique capacity or talent to see a particular expression imprinted on his memory and then redeploy it, as it were, finally. And that is something that is extremely difficult to do, as we all know. I mean, you can copy a drawing, and many of his drawings were copied by his students. And he may even have made replicas or autograph replicas of his works in the studio. But to be able to then call up from memory something and to draw it from your own visual memory is a remarkable talent. And he alone, I think, had it, and is what really makes him uniquely the genius that we celebrate.
You're talking about what's unique about Rembrandt and what makes him the master that he is, and he has this genius, really. So when scholars are looking today, what are they particularly looking for that would, so many of the works look very similar if you put a Rembrandt next to one of his students' works. What is that genius? What shows up on that image that then lets them know that it was done by the hand of Rembrandt?
You're talking now about something called connoisseurship. Mm-hmm. Connoisseurship is a very difficult thing to explain to people who've never experienced it all, because it all looks like sleight of hand, mm-hmm. like legerdemain. How can you come up with the name? But in fact, once you recognize it, you actually can conclude that the great connoisseur actually can tell the difference between these things. But the problem begins, as you explained, at the beginning, and the whole basis for instruction, which was based on imitation. The studio was actually a corporate entity. You were supposed to paint and draw in the master's style, and he could actually sell those works of art as part of the product of his studio. It was to maximize the productivity and returns of the studio. Rubens is the best example of this, and there was no artist that Rembrandt admired more than Rubens. He aspired to be Rubens. He never was going to make it. He was never going to work for all the aristocrats of Europe. He was never going to have a studio that he orchestrated the way the brilliant impresario that was Rubens. He never could do it. But in Rubens' studio, there's no question that he had artists paint on the same pictures mm-hmm. as he made it, and it was this Rubens ink that they were pursuing. Rembrandt, there's some of that some of that in his studio, but there also is a very clear individual hand in each one of these artists, and they do not appear through composition or something as the salient features of a particular image. They often appear in the little idiosyncratic ways in which they apply hatching, or they reinforce things, or like outlines of things. It is where connoisseurship reveals itself a little bit like a Freudian slip. Mm-hmm. It is when you say something that comes from you unintentionally, and that is as it were the line that makes the difference between Flink and Rembrandt.
It's like a fingerprint.
It's like a fingerprint. But it is really where the pressures of stylistic convention are relaxed, and you actually do something that is your own unique language, and that's when you can detect, well, this must be Eckhout, or this must be Ferdinand Boll, or this must be, and artists, art historians who have spent their whole lives doing this are much more effective at others. But then there's also a danger that you make such fine distinctions of these things that you build a whole house of cards based on certain attributions. And sometimes you wonder whether we haven't gone too far. So the pull and the tug and the differences of opinions of experts is a constant in the history of art, because there's no touchstone of proof that this is by Rembrandt and this isn't by Rembrandt.
Of course, one of the things that I think it's like the bigger question, I'm not even sure how much this is being addressed in the show, is just the time period in which Rembrandt was working. How was this huge economic boom in the Netherlands, particularly in Amsterdam, where he was working. It brought many different kinds of people into the city of Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. There was a tremendous amount of money changing hands.
Yep.
There was great prosperity, and it was considered to be this golden age, I guess, in terms of industry and economically and as well as artistically. You would say that. I want to know how that might have affected his patronage and those of the other artists working, within his orbit. Was there a greater market for art during that period?
Yes, there certainly was. The Dutch, for a brief period in the 17th century, were the richest people in Christendom. They were incredibly rich because they had this far-flung colonial empire. They made a tremendous amount of money in trade throughout Europe. Amsterdam was a booming city. They had closed down Antwerp. They're at war with the Spanish Netherlands at this time. They closed down Antwerp as a competing port, and Amsterdam
Had been
flourished.
the, right?
Had been
Right,
the northern port
right.
in all of Europe. And the Dutch become extraordinarily rich, and as a consequence, they can afford to buy art. They can dabble in such things as the luxury of art, because art is always a luxury. And they actually produce legions of artists. As a matter of fact, they produce too many artists. They have more registered artists in Amsterdam. Most of them tried not to register. Than they had butchers or bakers.
That's
Can you imagine?
unbelievable now.
So that their margin of profit was very small. I mean, if you hit on something that was a success. Hulse did portraits, Ruysdael did landscapes, Kolff did still lifes. If you hit on something that was a success, you didn't vary from the path because you wanted to secure that income stream. But there are rare artists like Rembrandt who do all things. He does all subjects. He does landscapes, he does still lifes, he does history paintings, portraits, you name it, he does it. He breaks the rule in many respects, and it's because he is kind of protean in his invention. He's infinitely creative, and you see it, I think, best in the drawings, because he just couldn't stop drawing. He had something to jot down on every little scrap of paper, and he tries to use these drawings to resolve challenges in exposition and in the dramatization of scenes. I think some of the most interesting drawings in the show are, of course, the biblical studies, where he always is drawn, as his teacher Peter Lostman had been drawn, to the kind of critical turning point in the story, when there's a revelation, or there is an interchange between figures that is the kernel of truth in the story. He likes to depict denouement, and
the high dramatic moment.
The high dramatic moment, and he does this repeatedly in his drawings. We have something. One of the sheets in the show is Zacharias and the angel. The angel comes to old Zacharias and tells him he's going to be a father. He said, "I'm going to be a father. My wife has been barren for decades, and he's soon to be the father of St. John the Baptist." And it's the wonderful scene of the visitation between Elizabeth and Mary, and then the two unborn children leap in their womb. There's a wonderful painting by Rembrandt of that in Detroit. So he picks the moments that are a revelation, and then he takes these drawings and he says to his pupils, "Now you do better than that. You take this subject, and this is the way I've done it. You show me how you would do it."
So he challenges them.
To
find another way.
Yes.
To do the same thing he's done.
To find, or he simply gives them. I'm convinced he only gave them the passage, and then they had the challenge of exegesis. To how do you interpret the passage?
I see.
And which is
very interesting.
Which is very much about what the Protestant religion is, what Calvinism is. It's about the word and the importance of the biblical text, interpretation of the biblical text. So that is very central to at least religious painting in Holland. And who's better than Rembrandt at it? And he challenges his students to do him one better. You should always ask, when you look at a drawing, what's its function? I mean, was it drawn simply as an exercise in coordinating the eye and the hand? Was it to record a specific place, some kind of novelty? Was it done naret leva, as they say, from life, or was it done out den geest, as they say, which is from your imagination? And sometimes you can't tell the difference. Sometimes you don't know whether the thing was done out in nature or whether it was done back in the studio. But you should always ask, what was the function of the drawing? Because drawings you didn't doodle. You had a function.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most important important challenge is when you're looking at these things, what did the artist want to do with this? Was it a study for an etching? Was it simply to record the picturesque look of a tumble-down farmhouse? Was it to a preparatory to a painting of a domestic subject, or was it a compositional study? All these things you have to ask yourself. But Rembrandt did them all.